Through the state's computerized geographic information system, waste sites can be located and studied in relation to freshwater wetlands and centers of population. The operation is critical to future generations to avoid repeating such costly tragedies as the Love Canal. This is one small example of the kind of information which must be preserved forever, faithfully replicated in each new digital technology standard as it comes along. It's an obligatory, one-way monologue with the future.
We have to have experts that understand systems and how to migrate them. We have to have routines in place for migrating information from one form to another. And those kinds of organizational issues need to be put in place and routinized so that they are part of the cultural fabric, not something new that we have to fret about. They have to be ordinary events in our daily lives. And it's moving from a period where we don't understand all the pieces that have to be put in place and their interrelationships to a point where we are naturally dealing with digital information and moving it forward as interest requires. That is the major cultural change and the nub of the problem that we're really facing here.
Amid the stored records and archives of states and municipalities, businesses and institutions are the train wrecks of the information age. Important digital information which can no longer be read. In Oregon, the primary national database for people with disabilities vanished. In New York, the corporate records of the Pennsylvania Railroad erased. In several large states, irreplaceable data on land use indecipherable because of missing software. The losses, though immense, are silent and invisible. We're aware of them only when it's too late.
Whether records survive or not depends on whether we as a society think it's important to see that they survive. And one of the differences between digital preservation and preserving traditional formats of records is that digital records don't just survive by accident. We have to make a conscious decision that they're worth keeping. We have to think about that when we create them in the first place in terms of the standards that we use. We have to really make a commitment to keeping them alive in a way that we haven't had to in the past. That's not to say that we haven't dealt with fragile materials, but we would run across things by accident that had been stored in an attic or a basement, and 50 years later or 100 years later still be able to read and retrieve and understand them. That won't be the case with digital records unless we make some kinds of conscious plans and have regular vigilance over them.
At the American Library Association annual convention, publishers who've been reinventing and redefining the concept of publishing gather to show off their digital wares.
I need the exit to log into Arabic Windows. What I can now do is say I want to go to... Oops, where'd it go?
Search full text, which we call level 1, or we can customize our search, and we call that level 2.
And we have the African American experience, the American Revolution, the Civil War, Westwood Expansion.
With the advent of electronic books and digital networks, librarians are increasingly concerned that there not be created information haves and have-nots. New York's Science, Industry, and Business Library counts itself part of the solution.
Few families in New York have the means to have internet access at home. So, for those who don't, this is our attempt to level the playing field. You could get off the airplane at Kennedy from Zambia, take a taxi in to the Science, Industry, and Business Library. No one will ask you for a piece of identification, for a library card, for a fee, but you just walk in the door, sit yourself at a computer, get on the internet, pull down a database, do whatever you wish for free.
One of the things that concerns me most is that there's such an enthusiasm for putting information into digital form. Many libraries are rushing into digital projects, and sometimes at the expense of their preservation microfilming projects. And the worst nightmare I can imagine is that all of the money that had been going into preserving books in the traditional way, microfilming or conservation projects, will be diverted to providing access to digital information without making any provisions for preserving it, so that money is being drained from the traditional preservation projects and nothing is being done about preserving the new digital information. And then we'd lose twice.
A lot of the new material that's getting created artistically and in a scholarly sense is being created electronically to begin with. It doesn't exist on paper. It doesn't get published in magazines anymore. Only gets published on the web or published in electronic form of some sort. And so we're in danger of losing all of that if we don't solve this problem.
The New York home of the Voyager Company, a leading producer and publisher of electronic books. Here, the creative possibilities of digitization are very exciting and immediate, while future preservation and access issues are a more distant concern.
What you'll be able to do is access a movie, which would be through this mirror. There'll be a timeline, a map of where Dracula exists.
What I'm working on is called Witness to the Future. It's a CD about environmental activism. What I have to do before I give everything to my programmer is make sure all the content is correct and everything's laid out, so all the graphics are fixed and everything.
I can't imagine that anything that we are making today will be available 100 years from now. I don't even think it'll be available 25 years from now. In fact, a lot of stuff that we made 7 or 8 years ago can't be played. There are two problems. One is the durability of the media itself, and the other is the machines that they play on. And nobody really knows how long the media will last, although our indications are that entropy takes over fairly quickly, and these things have a tendency to degrade much faster than anybody, at least in the companies that makes them, is willing to predict. And the second problem, though, is that the machines go out of style. And nobody bothers at the time to sort of make a translation program. And if you go out 100 years from now, the possibility that somebody will, have remembered to make a machine that runs Microsoft Windows 2.2, it's impossible. It won't happen.
Each of the media seems to be racing the others towards obsolescence as fast as it can. And in a sense, that's because they're each trying to improve as fast as they can. And so the new versions come faster and faster, and new versions make the old versions obsolete and unreadable. So it's a natural process, but it's one that we have to recognize is not helpful from a preservation point of view.
We get stuff that's 3 years old now, outdated. We pick up scrap computers from many companies in this valley. National Semiconductor, LSI Logic, Cypress Semiconductor. The list goes on, but I don't want to mention my customers. I have competition.
That's a good chip.
I estimate about $300 million for this load of mainframes is what they paid for them. And they're outdated in 8 years.
Computers were created essentially to service giant organizations, and they were tended by a sort of a priesthood of technicians. But once computers went from being something that exclusively belonged to large organizations to something that served and belonged to individuals, a tremendous amount of translation, psychological and sociological translation needed to be done. What I did was translate some of the ideas that belonged to the priesthood of technicians and made it accessible and usable to civilians, to ordinary people.
As more and more information is stored electronically, we are increasingly vulnerable at any time to catastrophic loss.
I have a PowerBook, the 5300, and it was supposed to be the latest, newest model, and apparently it had some problems in its development, and the logic board cracked, and shortly thereafter I lost my hard drive and everything, my world.
When computers crash, all is not always lost. There are professionals who specialize in recovery, in breathing life back into fragile, intricate disk drives, just long enough to coax off and capture the data.
Crash is where the drive doesn't work anymore. A crash can be a multiple of different things, though. A crash can be where the head actually makes contact and starts scraping off the medium that's on the platter that holds the data. That's the disk right there. That's the metal that the data is saved to. Now we're going to show you where we are magnifying onto each track. See these lines? There's sectors where data is kept, like a filing cabinet. It's kept in a particular spot. The data is stored in between these marks, and everyone has an address or an identification. If the data is all scraped off or gone, there's nothing we can do. But if there's something on that in that device that we can get to, we get to it within about a 95% ratio.
From cafes and offices to homes, libraries, and schools, people are rushing to embrace not only computers, but also the network of networks connecting it all, the World Wide Web, a technology of which it's been said, the only thing it changes is everything.
People go online. They play with aspects of themselves. They express pieces of themselves that they're not always aware that were even there. It's like Cyrano de Bergerac finding in the virtual reality of writing something about himself, a capacity for love and passion that he didn't even know was there. People are discovering that online.
It's a great place to be playing with this website.
We're talking about fundamental infrastructural changes in our society with this new electronic technology. So it's not any one particular application or so on. It is just a fundamental new kind of wiring for our society. Like 100 years ago, we put in the electricity system. We put